As Toronto Star columnist Chantal Hébert tells it, Pierre Poilievre is a liability to his party and is wasting his chance to become prime minister. Women don't like him, writes the Globe and Mail's Marie Wolfe. I've known Pierre for 20 years, and I can't say I've ever noticed that, but Marie Wolfe says he shouldn't be so quick to press the anger button. David Musgrop, a Canadian writing in the Washington Post, says he's a phony and a loudmouth. And Andrew Coyne, who I always thought was a conservative, says, God, Poilievre is a thug. One could go on. He's a busted flush, you see, and to the delight of the Eastern writers who truly understand Canadian politics, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney recently heaped praise upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership, while conspicuously neglecting to make any mention of Poilievre. There really is no accounting for tastes. But the fact there's a Conservative Party of Canada for Poilievre to lead is very much related to decisions Mulroney made that blew up the old Progressive Conservatives. Remember that Winnipeg CF-18 fiasco? But those who wish Pierre Poilievre well should not be alarmed at the media pile-on as Parliament wraps up for the summer. If he could choose his critics, these would be the ones he would pick. All those folks who circulate their ideas through the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, and the CBC, and having reviewed each other's work, figure they have taken the pulse of the nation. Now, to concede the smoke that is assumed to indicate the presence of a raging fire, a recent Leger poll did suggest that if an election had been held in May, Trudeau would have had a sporting chance of forming another minority government and a fourth consecutive term. Not a certainty, but it was not impossible. Okay. Pundits have also decided that the failure of the Poilievre team to break through in any of the recent by-elections represents a stalled party. Again, fair enough. However, if a week is a long time in politics, the more than 2 years before the next scheduled election is a really long time, and by-elections in safe seats with a 40% turnout seldom produce surprising results. Remember, 20 years ago, the same kind of people were saying the same kind of thing about Stephen Harper. He then went on to be Prime Minister for nearly 10 years. Let us just remember that 20 years ago, it was Preston Manning's efforts to draw the PCs into his united alternative that were rebuffed first by PC leader Jean Charest, who was completely blown out in last year's CPC leadership race, then by former Prime Minister Joe Clark, when he took over leadership of the failing PC party. Clark himself was utterly dismissive of the United Conservative movement under Harper. Oh, it would have wonderful debates, he said, but could never form a government. It's hard to remember that we ever listened to these people. But with the well-known attraction of reporters to conflict and personalities, a discouraging word from Clark was a story in Belinda Stronach's defection. A wound from which the party recovered by bedtime was a sensational development. And when Stockwell Day famously conducted a lakeside presser, his wetsuit arrival on a jet ski was the story, not what he said. So here's the thing. Perhaps the issue is less that Poilievre is too angry than that Canadians are not angry enough. Notwithstanding the soothing praise Mr. Mulroney lavished on Mr. Trudeau, what should you feel other than anger when the Prime Minister apparently failed to heed security warnings about Chinese electoral interference, doubled the national debt to look like a COVID hero, insults hard-working Canadians who pay their taxes and play by the rules, sets out to destroy Alberta's energy industry that funds equalization, and represents 10% of Canada's GDP. Again, one could go on. The F-35 debacle, the ethical violations, the strong-arming of a Solicitor General, prancing about in blackface, paying off a terrorist, but telling Canadian veterans there was no money for them. And then weaving and dodging in question period under Poilievre's skillful interrogation. A thug? A phony? A loudmouth? Not at all. It's just time somebody like him asked some of the questions that need to be answered. For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.